Before the boulder, before the eternal punishment, Sisyphus was just a king. The craftiest king alive, actually, and that's not a compliment the Greeks handed out lightly. He ruled Ephyra, which would become Corinth, and his reputation wasn't for warfare or piety. It was for outsmarting everyone who got near him. Homer calls him the most cunning of men. Not the strongest, not the most blessed, the most cunning. That detail matters. The gods had favorites they liked and heroes they respected. Sisyphus wasn't either. He was the one they watched sideways, because whenever something went wrong on Olympus, you could usually trace the leak back to him. One story has him catching Zeus in the act, literally watching Zeus carry off Aegina, a river god's daughter. Instead of looking away like a sensible person, Sisyphus traded that information to the girl's father in exchange for a freshwater spring for his city. He sold out a god for plumbing. That's Sisyphus. And Zeus did not forget it. When Zeus decided enough was enough, he sent Thanatos, Death himself, down to collect Sisyphus. Most people, when Death shows up at the door, go quietly. Sisyphus was curious. He wanted to see how the chains worked. And here's my favorite detail in the whole myth Thanatos showed him. He demonstrated the shackles he'd brought to bind Sisyphus for the journey to the underworld, and Sisyphus locked them onto Thanatos instead. Death. In chains. In Sisyphus's house. The immediate consequence was absurd. Nobody could die, anywhere. Soldiers stabbed each other in battles and walked away. Old men at the edge of death just stayed there. Ares, god of war, was furious. His whole domain had become meaningless. War without death is just expensive athletics. It was Ares who eventually went to find Sisyphus and free Thanatos. Some versions say Ares dragged Sisyphus to the underworld himself. But even that wasn't the end of Sisyphus. Because, before he'd let Thanatos take him, he'd already made arrangements with his wife. Before dying, Sisyphus told his wife Merope to do something very specific: don't bury him. No funeral rites, no offerings, no proper ceremony. She followed his instructions, which meant that when Sisyphus arrived in the underworld, he arrived as an improperly buried shade, technically dishonored. And Sisyphus, standing before Persephone, queen of the dead, made his pitch. He said it was his wife's fault. She'd neglected her duties. She'd shown no respect for the dead, for him, and surely Persephone, goddess of the underworld, wouldn't stand for a mortal wife dishonoring the proper rites. He needed to go back, just briefly, to scold her, sort it out, make sure his funeral was done correctly. Persephone let him go. This is the part that should make you laugh, because Sisyphus went back to Corinth and just lived. He didn't scold anyone. He didn't arrange his funeral. He ate and drank and aged and apparently enjoyed many more years of life before the gods finally, genuinely, ran out of patience. The trick only works once. Or, in Sisyphus's case, twice. After that, you get the boulder. The gods had options. They could have simply killed Sisyphus again and posted a guard. They could have locked him in Tartarus with the Titans. What they chose instead says something about how seriously they took the offense, and maybe about how well they understood Sisyphus. He was a man who ran on cleverness and ambition, a man who genuinely believed he could always find the angle, always find the exit. So they gave him a task with no exit. A boulder, a hill, and a rule: push it to the top. Every time he gets close, it rolls back. Not because the boulder is cursed, not because the hill is moving, the ancient sources vary on the mechanics, but because the moment the boulder reaches the summit, it slips. Every time. Forever. For a man who'd beaten death twice through sheer ingenuity, the punishment is specifically designed to be the one problem ingenuity can't solve. There's no trick here, no escape, no deal to offer Persephone, just the hill, the boulder, and the pushing. Camus saw something hopeful in that image, the idea that Sisyphus might own his fate by embracing it. Maybe. But the Greeks who wrote it weren't offering comfort. They were describing a man whose greatest strength became his specific torture. What the myth doesn't say much about, and what's actually the strangest part, is what happens between the boulder rolling back and Sisyphus reaching it again at the bottom. He has to walk down, every single time. Down the hill, back to the boulder, before starting again. That walk has no purpose. It's not the punishment is the pushing. The walk back is just the gap between failures. In a myth designed to strip away everything clever and effortful and triumphant about Sisyphus, the walk back is the one moment when he's not straining against anything, just moving through the dark. Whatever he thinks about on that walk, the Greeks didn't record. Maybe they thought it didn't matter. Maybe they thought it was too uncomfortable to imagine. The man who cheated death twice, padding back down a hill in Tartarus to pick up his boulder. He never got out. No clever trick worked. The gods were patient enough to outlast his cleverness, which turns out to be the only thing they needed to do. If you want more stories like this, kings